one of the ways that we've done that is by thinking about principles and frameworks. I think there was a very intelligent post by Charlene Lee at Forrester recently about the difference between a radical and a revolutionary. A radical is someone who stands there and shouts about change, and the revolutionary is the one that tries to make things happen and tries to make that revolution stick and create a workable structure around things. That's a Lego Lenin, in case you're wondering, representing revolution. So making revolutions work, we looked for ideas and analogies from other fields that could work in marketing, and we developed a social spaces framework along the lines of for some of our clients along the lines of Six Sigma, because we realised that you couldn't do a rule book, you couldn't do a policy book, you couldn't do a governance book without restricting people too much. And if you can't predict what's going to happen next year in terms of social media, then you need to be focusing on the principles, you need to be focusing on the structures. So Six Sigma was a very good, very live, very adaptable sort of approach for that. So we borrowed some of the structure from that and created a framework rather than a rule book. We arrived at three principles which we always talk about in our frameworks, but talk about within the team all the time, that were just the place to start from, understanding that we couldn't come up with a set of rules or a template for any particular social engagement. So understanding networks, being useful to networks, understanding how you can be live in your networks, not just plonking some video on them and wandering away for a couple of months. I've just got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to dive into some really important stuff, which is building stuff. This is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned at iCrossing, coming from a PR background. The idea of hiring a developer at a PR agency, an IT developer, to build technology for me was just mind-boggling. But actually, once you've been through the process of working with a talented developer, you realise that, A, it's not that expensive, that social media and social technologies and Web 2.0 and all this stuff means that actually developing your own technology is fairly straightforward, it's fairly easy. That you don't need to buy stuff off the shelf. Sorry for anyone sponsoring who's selling stuff off the shelf. You can actually build stuff yourself that might do exactly what you need instead of an approximation of what you need. I'm going to skip through these. Sorry, I've included too many slides. That through taking this idea from social media, from Web 2.0 companies of rapid prototyping, you can build little applications that will pay for themselves immediately. Because you can put them to work on projects straight away. You don't need to design solutions. One of the big things out of Web 2 that we've seen is this idea of building things quickly and then building lots and lots of features on top of them. That's one of the ways that we've been developing our network mapping tools, which has expanded into every part of the company, not just the social media part, but in the natural search and the advertising as well. In terms of our own being useful, we published an ebook about 18 months ago about what is social media. It's really basic, or probably too basic for most of the people in this room, since you all know what social media is. You've been to this conference before. And yes, it was very interesting. It was useful because bloggers linked to it, and et cetera, and so it did well in the Google rankings. But I wanted to just add to that story by telling you about how we talked a bit about how when you create stuff and you put it out there, it hangs around for a long time, that its value doesn't suddenly disappear like it did in the channel world. Because one of our Chinese researchers found a lot of links coming to us from China and decided to investigate, and found that there was a Chinese version of our ebook out there on the web, which was highly interesting. We don't have a Chinese office and we hadn't commissioned one, but because we'd published the ebook under a Creative Commons license, this lady, Jian Lui, had gone on her social network called Yiyang, one of her social networks, which is a social network for translating Chinese text into English and English into Chinese when there are useful business or marketing books, or actually any kind of blog post or materials that people are interested in. Found a couple of collaborators, spent a month translating our ebook into Chinese, intact with all of the links and all of the references to us. And it's, so we've had 3,000 downloads, I think, now in China of our ebook, which is nice and prompts us to maybe think about opening an office out there. And those three people then went on to create a company called InnoBook, which is translating ebooks into Chinese. I'm sure they'll get to Niall Cook's Excellent Enterprise 2.0 if that comes out under a Creative Commons license at any point. Yeah, very, very interesting what happens in the networks. Anyway, wrapping up, because I've run out of time. social media and innovation. I know it's been a bit of a romp, I know it's been a bit of a ramble, but hopefully there are some interesting ideas in there for you to think about further. But I think that social media gives us the imperative we have to innovate in order to stay relevant in this space. It's not just a case of waiting for someone else to come up with a case study. We need to building innovation into our campaigns. But there's a lot of inspiration out there, and there are a lot of tools and a lot of opportunities. If you can't find the tools, build your own. It's not as expensive as you think. And just returning to a quote which I used to use a few years ago, and it kind of seems relevant all over again, from Rupert Murdoch, about the scale and the importance of social media and these web technologies to build and destroy not just companies but whole countries. So there you go. So also I think it's a case of it is like, innovate or whatever. It's fine. I'm sure everyone will get by without innovating. This is a plea. It is a plea to, if you really want to seize the opportunity that's out there, to really think about how to build innovation into what you're doing within your organisation or in your agency. And just to say that I think that social media's influence will touch every part of every organisation and will inspire new models for communications, marketing, business and beyond. And it's an imperative and inspiration in the environment. I've said that before. I've been a bit ill lately. Sorry. So thank you very much, and I hope that was useful to you.